We are, yes, we're very happy today to have as our speaker our clergy leader, Bart Worden. In addition to his work here at this ethical society, he is also the executive director of our parent organization, the American Ethical Union. Prior to his training for ethical culture leadership, Bart worked as a social worker in a number of settings, working primarily with programs that help people recover from psychiatric disability. Bart has continued his engagement with local groups to confront bias in law enforcement, undo systematic racism, and promote civil rights for all. He is currently working with several people to address the problem of political polarization and the conflicts that go with it through guided conversations with politically conservative and politically liberal people from our local communities. Today's address is titled Making and Sustaining Ethical Connections. So please welcome Bart to the podium.
Thank you, Oliver. Really great to be here today. I did want to let people know that we are currently live on Facebook at this very moment. Anyone know Facebook Live? Let me see if I can get the feed up here. Yep, we're there. Say hi! Oh, and I just said it right there. Okay, excellent. So, anyway. So today our hearts go out to the people in the path of Hurricane Irma, and we hope for their safety and their survival. Our hearts go out, too, to the affected people who've been affected by the earthquake in Mexico, by Hurricane Harvey, by the monsoons in India, the wildfires burning in the west of the United States. And our hearts go out, too, to the people affected by the many human conflicts that rage in Afghanistan, Syria, South Sudan, Yemen, Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Myanmar. And our hearts go out, too, to the people struggling in our communities who are trying to lead a good life but face the challenges that make it difficult to do that. Both the systemic ones that we've supported for so long and also maybe the individual ones that come with things that happen in life that are unexpected. But our hearts go out because we're aware that when people suffer, it makes life unbearable for people at times. And if we can't find a way to help move things forward, then it leaves us feeling bad too. Even if our lives are relatively comfortable and we're doing all right, knowing that there's suffering weighs on us and makes it just difficult, So for ethical culture, the remedy that we're recommending has to do with how we connect with each other. That there's a possibility in our relationships to find ways to help move things in a better direction. And that can be a better direction at a time when people are suffering from a calamity, or when people are struggling to make decisions in life, or people are just trying to find some avenue for success or for making a living. There's all these ways that we can interact with people that can be helpful in that end. The founder of ethical culture, Felix Adler, had some, I think, very powerful ideas that became the basis for the ethical culture movement and continue to this day. And the two that I'd like to focus on today are, one, his sense that group progress is both the vehicle and the indicator for moral improvement. Group progress. All right? This is opposed to individual progress. Maybe very great for individuals to get better and be really nice, ethical people, but unless it populates the group itself, you won't really see the kind of change that you're hoping to see. Right? So how do you help the group itself become one that is more infused with an ethical sense? The other area is the interaction of the uniqueness of people and the mutuality of our relationships that help us learn and grow. So if you imagine that each person is somehow different from each other person, and yet is also relating to other people, you kind of get the notion here. There's a bit of a tension that goes on between connecting and being familiar and being kind of having, what is this, it's like-minded. And also the tension that comes when you are together with people and you notice the differences. You notice that people are going in a different direction, have different ideas, different interests, different beliefs. And for ethical culture, the notion of connecting with people whose beliefs are quite different from our own is one of the core elements of moral progress. In other words, finding a way just to be with people that are like you may be very comfortable, but it probably doesn't move the ball forward in the grander scheme in the way that we'd like to see. So I'm pulling this address together. I thought, well, let me go back and try to maybe go from some definitions to see if that is helpful for me. So I said, well, I want to talk about ethical relationships, so let's look up the word ethical. And, you know, it's just so dry, you know, relating to ethics, ethical theories, involving moral approval or disapproval. These are the kind of things that are in people's minds. And the ethics that we would like to focus on in ethical culture go beyond our minds. Right? We talk about deed before creed. We want to see an embodiment of ethics in the way that we live our lives, not just an idea that we can think about and wonder about. It's not just about our ideas and our choices. It's about our living and what we do as people. So Wikipedia, of course, is always helpful. So I went for ethical relationship. And they actually had a pretty helpful one. It says, an ethical relationship in most theories of ethics that employ the term is a basic and trustworthy relationship that one has to another human being that cannot necessarily be characterized in terms of any abstraction other than trust and common protection of each other's body. Isn't that interesting? Let me read that one again. A basic and trustworthy relationship that one has to another human being that cannot necessarily be characterized in terms of any abstraction other than trust and common protection of each other's body. Honesty is often a major focus. That whole notion of that trust and that protection of bodies is a place that has broken down so badly in our culture of late, and is something that I think we really would do well to spend more time and energy on working on. In the blurb about me, it really talks about how I'm working on trying to figure out ways past the polarization that is at play here. And when you look at how people talk about opposing groups, there is a lack of trust, and there is a lack of intention to protect the bodies of these others. Right? We're locked in conflict. And when we're locked in conflict, those two things are probably the first to go. Right? I'm reminded actually of World War I. Did anyone see the series? It was something about the experience. It was an NPR series on World War I. It was fairly recent, but it was several parts. And it was very difficult to watch because the widespread carnage of that war was just horrific. And I'm sure you remember that, you know, this was the war that was fought in many ways in trenches. That we had these two opposing sides and a line between and trenches in there, and people were spending weeks and months and maybe years in these trenches and only coming out really to fight or to defend, right? And so this line of conflict just kind of stayed put for years. And in the midst of it, people just kept getting killed and killing each other. And it reminded me of how, when you're in the midst of a conflict, you keep hoping that you're going to win. But what you're really doing is avoiding losing, right? Which is a much weaker place to be. You're just trying to keep from losing. And there is no real progress in that. Right? If we're just left with keeping from losing, we're really not progressing ourselves. We're really not moving to a place. And yet, if we're locked in conflict, what choices do you really have? Right? So one of the things that happens in trenches is you really don't see the other people until you're in the midst of a firefight, right? So you're either trying to bomb people that you don't see, or you're trying to rush over a line and look for people to find them. And so you're already at the ready for these kind of things. I don't think it's such a far cry to look at how we behave on the political spectrum these days from how people behaved in trenches in World War I. Right? Maybe we don't have the physical weapons of guns and things like that. But the intention to harm, I think, is still strong. Think about the people, how aggravated you may feel when you hear things voiced from a political point of view that is so different from your own. How angry we feel, how much we want to really win this battle, make sure that we don't lose out on these things that we fought hard for civil rights and for other protections, and you name it. And yet, if we're locked in conflict, the chances are very good that there may be some mild advancement, but then there's going to be pushback. There's going to be advancement and pushback. And until there's a way to actually get at the root of disrespect, the root of fear and anger, the root of distrust, there really isn't a way to get past conflict, to get past polarization, right? Because basically you wind up acting out your polarized point of view. Now, this is a bitter pill for me personally. I've spent a fair amount of time in the last couple of years ramping up my activism and getting out there and marching on the streets and carrying signs and yelling and other kind of things. And these are things that it took me a while to get to because I was afraid to do these sorts of things. And now, getting out there and doing it, I could feel the energy of it and how good that was. On the other end, though, there's a lack of efficacy that comes with these kind of actions, isn't there? I mean, how much have we really seen change for the better as a result? Well, not so much, I'm afraid to say. But how do you get past that? Well, one of the things I'm working on right now is finding ways to bring people together who have different political points of view in ways that help them at least connect and check in with each other. Did people see the Heineken ads, by the way, that were cruising on Facebook? Heineken had this program going where they're inviting people to do a task together, and they're inviting people that they knew, if they'd met each other on the street, would really have lots of problems, So people who are homophobic with transgender folks, and people who are liberal activists with people that are, conservative, et cetera. And then we put them in this room and they go through these tasks. And what they found was so oftentimes by having people actually interact on a human basis without getting into the political aspects of it, they were actually able to make connections. And connections that probably could persist outside of the activity itself. And those interactions probably made a difference in people's attitudes and outlooks. And certainly made a difference in terms of people's expectation for how things will go if someone is behaving in a way that's disagreeable to me. I believe it's time for us to do more of those things in our lives. So when I think about the people that I come across? Well, right now, it's been pretty easy to come across a bunch of people who are politically liberal. We're out there, we're vocal, and it's really no worries, So if I want to gripe about 45, all I have to do is step around any straight corner, and I'm bound to come across somebody, and we can get into a loud conversation about how much we hate what's going on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And that's all okay. But it's time to find those folks that aren't like-minded and to find some way to connect with them. What I'm working on right now is an arrangement with a group called Better Angels. Anyone know Better Angels? They're out of New York City, and they are dedicated to finding ways to help people manage conflict in a way that is much more effective and helpful than what we're currently seeing. So there's basically three ways that you work on conflict. One is you just engage in it and you keep fighting until you win. Another is that you find a way to kind of compromise a bit and just kind of manage it, knowing that you're kind of everyone's going to be unhappy at some point, kind of thing. And then they're thinking that there is a third way if we put the time and energy into it, and that is transforming conflict. In other words, getting past just the managing so that everyone's unhappy to finding some path towards a commonweal that can satisfy everyone. A major challenge that probably will take multiple generations and, multiple cultures, et cetera, but what better thing might we be doing at this time? I mean, if we put our time and attention into finding ways to undo some of the distrust and anger that are making it impossible for people to even talk to each other, we have the chance of making a much bigger shift in how things go forward than we do right now. I was on a conference call. I'm part of a clergy group, the Clergy for Social Action. And one of the people in the group said, when he looks out, he's becoming more and more worried that we're actually leading to civil war, right? Actual war in our own country. That level of fearfulness is bubbling up in people these days. And it could be really ugly if we don't find more ways to try to get in there and push it back. So one of the problems with Better Angels is in order to get them to work with you, you need to first establish connections with the people who have different points of view politically, which happens to be a little bit difficult to do in an ethical society, I'm finding. And it's also kind of hard to do with the other groups that I'm connecting with. It seems like most of the people that I come across are people who are politically liberal and politically progressive, and trying to connect with people who are in organizations that are politically conservative has been a challenge, shall we say. I've reached out to a few legislators, and they aren't returning my calls. I guess that marching wasn't so good after all, in some respects. I tried reaching out to a couple of religious organizations, and it's kind of in process there. But on Thursday night, I actually came upon somebody who's with the Police Benevolent Association. And it turns out that this person is actually liberal-leaning himself and is known for that within the PBA, but that most of his membership are politically conservative. Is this a surprise? That our police departments are largely Trump supporters? Well, I probably shouldn't be, but one way or the other. In my conversation with him on Thursday night, he actually expressed interest in working with me to see if our two organizations can connect. And so what we would need then is we need 20 people altogether, 10 people who are liberally minded, politically liberal that is, and 10 people who are politically conservative. And then the Better Angels people come through, and they have a number of experiences that they walk people through to help them connect in a non-bloodletting manner. And I'm kind of excited about this. I think it's the kind of thing that if we can do this successfully, wouldn't it be nice to break down some of the distrust? I mean, I personally have a lot of distrust of the police departments. You know, I've been working on the criminal justice end for a good number of years now, and what I keep seeing is a high level of bias in the policing in many cases, and a strong worry on the part of people in many of our vulnerable communities that if they ever get stopped, their lives are in danger. I mean, this is not an easy kind of thing. How great it would be to be able to connect with some of the people who are on the other end of the law enforcement aspect here, to see about the humanity that might be driving them, right? And to see if there's some way that we can form a connection and maintain it. But it takes a lot of effort. It takes a commitment to move forward, and possibly a commitment to kind of let go a little bit of our own desire to win points and to influence people in a particular direction. So I'm saying this because it could well be that there are people in this room right now that would like to participate in this. And if you were inclined to do that, I invite you to approach me and let's see what we can work out. But let's do so with an eye to understanding that again, it's the group progress that really makes for moral progress for everyone. And so when we have a divided community, finding a way to resolve some of those divides is really the pathway to progress. And second, it's our connections with people who are unlike us, who really can have perhaps the strongest impact on who we are, how we behave, and how we move our lives forward. So my invitation, try this out. Look for ways to connect with people in your own lives already, and see if there are avenues for you to engage. Yeah, I know in the past I've spoken of my own struggles in my family. I have a brother who has very different political views than I have. And at one point we got ourselves to a point where we were pretty comfortable with each other, but then things came apart around Fox News. And we never quite got back there again. And so we wound up having this hiatus of contact. No calls on birthdays even, no calls on holidays. And we finally broke through with a call on a birthday that actually worked, and then an invitation to dinner. And I'm highly enthused about the invitation to dinner. If you cook well, you have a much better chance of a good outcome for your night, I'm finding. But it really worked, because we were able to steer away from the areas of conflict, because we weren't going to get anywhere with them anyway. And to steer toward the love of taste, the interest in our children and how things are moving along for them, taking care of our yards, other things that, were safe topics. But safety, remember, it's the trust and the protection of each other's bodies. Safe topics are okay when we're trying to connect with people that are very different from us. In fact, safe topics are vital. So, my invitation, get out there, get safe, protect each other's bodies and your own, and come back again next week.